Good evening. It's been 31 years in a row that the World Center of Bnei B'rith recognizes Israeli journalists who have covered in the most profound, comprehensive, and professional way in both printed media, broadcast, and online media, everything that is going on among Jewish communities all over the world, and everything that happens in this realm of relationship between Israel and the diaspora. This enterprise was founded following the long-standing commitment of Bnei B'rith to foster the relationship between the State of Israel and the Jewish world and their understanding of the profound impact of quality journalism here in Israel on this relationship. The construction of bridges between the State of Israel and the diaspora is one of the main goals for which the Bnei B'rith World Center was established, serving as the official and permanent representative of the Bnei B'rith World Organization in Jerusalem and as its arm in Israel since its founding in 1980. In the wake of COVID, the World Center returned to host diplomats, politicians, intellectuals, and journalists in Israel and continues to instill the legacy of Jewish rescuers in the Holocaust, contributing to the extensive pro-Israel political activity of Bnei B'rith around the world and serving as an anchor for Bnei B'rith's branches in 50 countries all over the world. Back in the day, the establishment of the World Center came as the organization's demonstrative response to the departure of 13 embassies that resided in the city as instructed by the UN Security Council following the adoption of the Jerusalem Unification Law. The Jerusalem Award has been one of the World Center's leading enterprises for over 3 decades. The Bnei B'rith organization began operating in Israel in 1888. After the establishment of the Jerusalem Lodge, almost a decade before the establishment of the Zionist movement, its members, among them the heads of the new Yeshuv, such as David Yalin, Yosef Meyuchas, Eliezer ben Yehuda, Yechiel Michal Pines, and Dr. Aharon Mazia, established, among other things, the National Library and the Hebrew Language Committee, and were engaged in settling the land, Jewish education, stubborn war against the missions, and instilling the Hebrew language and building a relationship with Jewish communities around the world in general, and in the Ottoman Empire in particular. All this with the aim in places such as Damascus, Alexandria, and other places, all this with the aim of establishing a national Jewish framework in the land of Israel.
הענקת פרס העיתונאות של בני ברית, ארגון שהפך לשם נרדף לנטילת אחריות וערבות הדדית בארץ ובעולם היהודי, שקצרה היריעה מלפרט את תרומתו לטיפוח יחסי ישראל והתפוצות ותקומת העם היהודי בארצו, זו אחת הדרכים שבהם אנו שומרים על הקשר בינינו. אני מבקש להודות לכם, חברות וחברי בני ברית, על תרומתכם הרבה מאוד למדינת ישראל, לעם ישראל ולחברה הישראלית.
We have representatives in 51 countries. We're highly active and we follow up with concern on the great distance that's being formed between Israel and the diaspora in recent years. And the president, in his efforts to convene, and he mentioned that his effort to convene all the people, his initiative for a global Jewish dialogue that was born out of his deep concern regarding the relationship between us here in Israel and our brothers and sisters in the diaspora. Good evening. In the Israeli media, it's difficult to find a lot of coverage of the diaspora, even though we're all come from one people, and even though after 75 years of independence, more than half the Jewish people still doesn't live in Israel. The media in the state of the Jews isn't always sufficiently curious about what's going on, unless it's an anti-Semitic event or another acute event. And the proof for that in the Hebrew-speaking Israeli media, you can hardly find even one journalist that his or her main preoccupation is covering the diaspora. And this is why we were delighted to discover Itamar Eichner, a long-standing journalism who has been covering one of the most important areas of coverage in media, which is the political coverage, and one of the most important media outlets in Israel, the Yedioth Ahronoth newspaper and the ynet website. And still he's found the time and interest to devote many articles to the situation around around the Jewish world. And his articles are not some kind of an afterthought. He doesn't just cover the Jewish community as something that he does in passing when in a political diplomatic visit to these countries, but he covers various topics and communities, whether it's the Jewish communities in the Ukraine and Russia, of course, who were severely impacted by the war that broke out between these two countries this past year, and also, of course, the Israeli community in the U.S., rehabilitation of Jewish communities in Poland, and the recreation of Jewish life in several Arabic countries following the Abraham Accords.
So good evening to everybody, distinguished guests, members of Nebrith organization. The year is 1991 and the Soviet Union is crumbling and collapsing. There is hunger on the streets, and tiny little Israel decides to send an outline to Warsaw with lots of baby milk powder, hoping it will open doors for it. And I was then just a beginning reporter working at the Israel News Agency that existed at the time. And this, the offer to accompany this Milky Way sort of mission sounded excited. So we landed in Moscow airport, minus 20 degrees. We handed over that formula, the milk formula. And the plane took off to Warsaw, where it flew to Israel hundreds of Jews from the Soviet Union, new immigrants who had dreamed of a new home in Israel. I already fell in love with the Jewish world back then and a diaspora Jewry. Working in the fields provided me with dozens of such experiences. For example, the privilege of joining the El Al plane during Operation Solomon, or visiting Jewish communities in Ukraine, in Hawaii. And you know, last year in the extermination camp Auschwitz, I visited that, and I was where I prepared an interesting report that will be published tomorrow. I think, again, it's a calling to be able to survey the fight against anti-Semitism and to be able to sound these voices in remote places in the world. Now, governments don't like to be mentioned as people who don't fight anti-Semitism, and that is why I think this the coverage is so important. Publishing various articles and reports, again, helps and backs communities around the world. They feel they have the support of the Israeli state and Israeli media. I think in the world of media today, when information moves in the speed of light, you cannot undermine the power of the media. Through our stories, our reports, our investigations, we come to expression the cunningness of anti-Semitism, and we help in mitigating it. We have to inform, we have to educate the public, we have to promote dialogue, and I very much hope that after having read many of his articles, and I really love those that I received, that Israeli journalism and that Israeli journalists learn something about the quality of journalism, what professional journalism is, what is reliable journalism, as I myself learned from a number of articles written by Yehuda Gross.
The question now is, have we crossed a Rubicon? Are we living in a brave new world? Or is this a one-off event, the result of a unique and potentially short-lived set of circumstances? These are not insignificant questions. They will have profound ideological, political, and financial ramifications for the state of Israel and the Jewish people around the world going forward. And it's the role of journalists who cover this area to not only answer those questions, but to offer the proper context and consequences for what they mean. It's a big responsibility, and I pray that we are up to the challenge.
To Josh Aronson. So Josh Aronson is a journalist at Maariv, at the Jerusalem Post, and in Shavim news portal, and his articles on the Israel and diaspora relations attest to the fact that nothing Jewish is foreign to him. He wrote about Ukrainian Jewry that immigrated to Israel in large numbers following the war. He wrote about, again, rescuing ancient Torah scrolls from Poland. He wrote about anti-Semitism in the USA and more. Josh Aronson's firm belief in the power of people with disabilities to conquer the world. I'm quoting from your CV. Led him to impressive achievements in journalistic writing in general and in the field of Israel and diaspora relations in particular. I did a lot of work to be the first journalist in Israel on the autistic spectrum, but there's still a lot of work ahead in order to change the different prejudices and the stigmas that are necessary for equality. And it's important that more people with disabilities will get a place of honor in the media and will work in different media. B'nai Brit is an organization that helps so many institutions and organizations. Again, it focuses on this very important point of fostering the connection between Israel and the diaspora. Now, for those who are currently living in the diaspora in England, know how important this connection is and how much we must do to activate and foster this connection and inform our friends in Israel that in the diaspora loves you and cares for you, but also it's important that Israel take care of Jews in the diaspora, and you, B'nai Brit, you create this change, and together with us, the journalists, we can change the world.
His entire life, Hildesheimer has mainly focused on reporting on the diaspora Jewry and the different communities, including subjects of Aliyah, absorption, Holocaust, anti-Semitism, etc. It is thanks to Izhak Hildesheimer that the religious population in Israel learned so much about about Jewish diaspora, and this is why the panel of jury of the B'nai Brit World Center saw fit to give him the Life Achievements Award. Hello, shalom to the Israelis. And I would like to start my brief address with these two words. Quite often, especially in the electronic broadcast media, on the radio, TV, when there are reports on terrible disasters and terrible events that happen abroad in the diaspora, it could be an earthquake, a terror attack. I've already noticed decades ago that quite often on the radio or on TV, they always say the Israelis, they're fine. What happened to the Jews? That doesn't matter. Even though there is some improvement, I also fought for this in the Journalists Association. I suggested several times to bring up the issue of the diaspora coverage in their in their annual conferences, but nobody wanted to hear about it. Well, there is some improvement in recent years, but still, even in recent years, we often hear this term, no Israelis have been harmed or killed. And now we will pass on to the special citation named after Naomi for fostering Israel diaspora relations through the arts in memory of Naomi Shemer. It was founded in 2014, and so far David Daor, Itamar Eichner, Norit Hirsch, David Broza, Yoram Gaon, the Shalva singing group, Danny Sanderson, and Shuli Natan have received it. This year it will be awarded to the Israeli Philharmonic Orchestra, and indeed many ambassadors have said over the years that years of diplomatic activity do not bear the fruits or yield the fruits that are made in one concert of the Israeli Philharmonic. And this is why the Philharmonic Orchestra devotes, since its establishment, efforts and concerts and sees itself as the orchestra of the State of Israel and the Jewish people, whether it's the tours in Egypt between the years 1940 to 1943 in an attempt to become part of the Mediterranean region. It performed all over the world to show the beautiful face of the State of Israel to all corners of the earth. In Berlin, Warsaw, and other cities, as if the music performed by this orchestra declared, we are here. The Jewish people, its heritage and its culture cannot be annihilated. The Israeli Philharmonic Orchestra and its management and the musicians and the musical director indeed consider themselves to be the orchestra of the Jewish people. On behalf of the musical director Lav Shani and the board and the musicians, we'd like to thank B'nai Brit World Center for this great honor, and we will do everything we can in order to continue and strengthen our ties with Jewish communities all over the world. Thank you very much.
First of all, I really want to thank you for agreeing to have this conversation so soon after you took up the mantle of the editor-in-chief of the Jerusalem Post. I'm sure this is a very busy time for you right now as you put the today's paper to bed, so to speak, and I'm sure you had to update the headlines because of the terrorist attack. I'm sure you want to continue the great affiliation that the Jerusalem Post has with this prize. As you know, quite a number of journalists from the Jerusalem Post have received it in the past. So it's great to have you here and to continue this relationship with the Post.
I would like to thank you for the esteemed and wonderful Izhak. I remember way back when I was spokesperson of the Jewish Agency, we would correspond, and you still keep sending me tips and thoughts about journalistic work, and I truly appreciate that. And I would like, of course, to thank you for the fact that over the years, the journalists from Jerusalem's Post, they won this important and respectable award, and many fine and respectable journalists. And I do hope that this award will continue to serve as an inspiration for journalists from all over Israel and the Jewish people to respect their extremely important journalistic work, that journalists from Jerusalem Post will keep winning these awards.
I grew up with the importance of news. The importance then was Israeli news from the Yishuv and later on from the State of Israel to the Jewish community. It was in that direction. But now we're talking about the opposite. We're here celebrating the folks, you gentlemen and ladies, who are reporting on what happens in the rest of the Jewish world for Israel. It's just as important, perhaps even more important now, because in so many ways the balance have changed. And so what I want to say to you, and I want to be very brief, is this prize and this occasion is absolutely fundamental.